So we are going to do the Freedom pattern by Fabric Cafe. It's traditionally done in red, white, and blue, but we are going to change that up a bit. And I'm going to actually try it in African fabrics. I have done a red, white, and blue quilt that they had before in Tula's, just to show you guys different options. And this time we're going to do it in these African fabrics. It should be fun. For fabric 1, believe it or not, I think fabric 1 is the red. For the red, I'm actually going to do blue. So the blue is going to be fabric 1. Fabric 2, which is all the white and the background, I'm going to actually do that in the African fabrics. And then fabric 3, we are going to frame that in the orange. I think this is going to be cool. I think. It took me a long time to figure out what was going where, and I've been very intentional about how I'm going to cut this fabric. With African fabric, it comes off the bolt a little different. It is much wider than our fabrics. So where is the fold? The fold is down yonder here. This is not the fold. I don't know. I've lost the fold at this point, guys. Here it is. So this fabric is a lot longer. It's still a yard this way, left to right, but I want to say it is almost 60 inches. Let's see. Yeah. It is this right? So this fabric looks like it's close to 72 inches, which is a lot. It's really big. But I was debating, I was like, do I want the stripes to run this way? But I think that's going to be weird. So I'm going to actually need this fabric to run this direction through the quilt. So all the cream should be going this way. So I'm going to have to really do a decent job of lining this up. It's pretty good now, but I'm going to line it up just a little bit. I'm going to be very careful about it, just so that it doesn't look too wonky with this. We really want this to be a straight cut. I want to be pretty consistent, and I'm concerned about that. That's going to take some, it's going to take some effort on my part. But once I get it, then we'll be cooking with gas, and then these little cute guys will go in the corners, and this will be the focal fabric in the center. So it's going to be okay. We'll be fine. But I do really want this to go to be pretty symmetrical. I don't want it to be wonky. I mean, you're going to have a shift when you're sewing anyway, but I'm going to take great care to make sure that this is, I'm not necessarily going to cut it specifically, you know, like trying to get that, but I am going to try to get it straight. So I'll be doing a little peeking to see if it's lined up the way that it should be. I'm freaking out about it, but we're going to do it anyway. I've only got to do it, I think, 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, we're going to figure it out. That's the scariest part about this particular pattern. But once I get that, I'll be cooking with gas. Otherwise, it should be a super simple. Super simple. I'm not 100% sure I showed you the fabrics that were going with it. Did I? Did we talk about that? So this African fabric is going to be the cream, and I'm going to use that as fabric 2. We are going to frame this entire thing in the orange. So that's going to be, and this orange is really shiny. It's pretty. I've used it once before. And I always say life is too short to use the same fabric twice, but I'm doing it with that one. And then this blue grunge is going to be fabric number 1. African is going to be 2. And this orange is going to frame it, and it's going to be fabric number 3. Let's hope this comes out cute. So I have folded this in half. I'm going to freshen up that edge there. So we're just going to freshen up that edge. And I have this fabric doubled over. So I'm going to cut several cuts at a time. It's just power cutting. It's just making it go so much faster. So that is all the strips that we need from this fabric. It looks like I have a really nice chunk of fabric left over for another project. That's quite a bit left over, actually. Hopefully I cut as many as I needed. Let me do a little counting here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then this is my 7th strip. Yeah, I did. I cut them all right. And then here's this extra strip. And this is all that we need from this. I'm going to subcut that guy. But then I have this left over. This is about, let's say about 8.5 inches left. That's a really nice piece of leftover fabric. Not even going to call this a scrap. We're just going to say that's a really nice piece of leftover fabric. Now I guess I will do a little subcutting here. So I just finished doing a little subcutting here, and that's all we need, some subcuts. And we've got more leftover fabric. And then we will just move on to the next color. So this is fabric number 1. I'm totally scared because fabric number 2, I'm going to cut these all in order, but fabric number 2 is the African fabric, and I really want to get that straight. So I've got to think through how I'm going to approach that. I've got to make it make sense. So this is so big. This is so big. Okay, here is the fold this way. Jeez, am I gonna double this up? I don't know what I'm gonna do. Let me stop and think for a moment. So for the African fabric, this is really a fun way to zhuzh up this pattern. Because none of these strips have been cut in the exact same place, in the exact same way, I can't just sew them together. And that's what the pattern calls for. The pattern says just sew all your strips together and then just cut what you need, cut what you need, cut what you need from those strips, and you'll get enough to do the stripy part. With this African fabric, I really cannot comfortably just sew these strips together because they haven't been cut in the exact same place, and they won't be a continuous visual look. It won't look great. So because this fabric is so long, I just went ahead, and because there's so much of it, I was able to just cut each strip individually for the stripes. Each stripe I have a lot of fabric. And for this big fabric that sits right in front of the block, I've decided to fussy cut. It's a great place to fussy cut. Why not? So I've cut this strip and I looked at it and I was like, great, it's got some of these little guys in there. So I just halved it. I just divided it by 2. And then you stick your center down on the, wherever you want to be the focal point. And then you just cut. And that's what I've done here. And then I'm going to flip it around and just get what I need. And then that'll be that. And then I will have a fussy cut square. So now he is cut centered. Interesting, because I don't know that this pattern is super duper symmetrical, which is interesting because I can see a little bit of this guy's head. Interesting, right? But this guy will sit dead center, and this guy right here will get caught in the seam allowance, and I won't have to worry about probably seeing that there. Not that that's really going to bother me, but I can see that it's there, whatever. So this is going to be my focal image up there, and then I'm going to finish subcutting. Lots of cutting, but then at the same time, not so much. If I had done this pattern the way that it was called for, it's not bad at all. It's just a ton of strips and a ton of little squares. Easy peasy. I'm going to finish subcutting, and then I'm going to cut fabric number 3, and then we'll be ready to assemble. So this is what we have. We've got one guy that seems like he is just a little off kilter. It kind of feels like it's sloping down. I can see a little bit more of this, but I don't know. Well, he looks okay. This guy's straight. This one looks pretty straight. This looks pretty straight. I think we did a pretty good job. I don't think it's going to be super noticeable. African fabrics are very busy and bossy, as I like to say, so I think we'll be fine. I did a pretty good job of getting that straight. And then we have the rest of the blocks over here. And now I'm going to cut fabric 3, and then I'm going to put this to the side until tomorrow, where we will put this guy, we'll start putting it together. It shouldn't be difficult. It's just a ton of half square triangles, which is not uncommon for a fabric cafe pattern. So we'll just work it out. I am almost positive that I want to bind this quilt in black. So I'm not going to cut the binding from this fabric, which is going to make cutting this fabric even faster. And just like that, these are done. So this is going to frame the quilt. Actually, I think one of these needs to be subcut. I know one of them does, so I'm going to subcut that really quickly. I forgot about that. So we've got stripes for the stripes, more stripes for the stripes, perfect. We've got tons of half square triangles. We've got our focal. We've got our focal point here. We've got our border and tons of triangles for half square triangles. Tons of squares for half square triangles. I don't know how all that's going to work itself out, but I'm looking forward to it. So we've got all our pieces cut out, and we are just going to move these out of the way. And we've got a ton of these strips. We've got 7 to be exact. We are going to take these and we are going to sew them end to end. I'm going to take off the selvage, sew all of them end to end until I have a super long strip. The reason why we can do these end to end is because this is just a grunge. It reads as a background, and when I join it, it's not going to be really obvious where the join is. If you're using African fabric, more than likely it's going to be a little bit longer, and you will not be able to do that with that, but that's okay because you will have enough fabric to make each strip individually. So here goes. I'm going to chop off the selvage and just sew them end to end. I don't know why I just unfolded this. Haha. And I need to press out this little crease right here and this crease right here. So I'll turn on the iron and do that too. I think I'm going to crisp these up with some of that spray. That spray is a game changer. I am totally going to crisp it up and just spray a ton of spray on these strips and let them set for a few minutes, and then I'm going to press them out. I just want this to be crispy. So I have sewn the blue strips, which are my fabric number 1, into one long strip. And from here, I'm just going to make several cuts into the strips. Well, I'm going to get it together. And I'm just going to make several cuts. These are all for the stripes. Nothing crazy. Just all the striping, and I've starched them and pressed them out. So I'm going to do a bunch of those, and then we should be good. And it's a lot of those. It's a lot of them. I think I'm doing 3 of one and then like 7 of another size. I think that's how that's going to go. It's just the stripes though. It's nothing major. So for this, the fabric number 1 is going to go here. Fabric number 2. Fabric number 1. Fabric number 2. And fabric number 1. And then we have another fabric number 2. So I'm just going to sew all these together. Simple, easy. So this is how this is all gonna go, and then we're just gonna make this one unit, and then after that we'll do the same thing for this bottom portion right here. Very simple. So this is this all pressed out. It looks pretty good. It's a little wavy, like a little bit, but not really. You know, it's like, oh, this guy's leaning a little bit. Very little. I'm pleased. So we shall do the longer strips, and then we'll come on to the big guns. So I have pieced this together. We've got the whole thing, and so we've got this bottom part, and then we've got that top part up there, and I've pressed all my seams open. I find that I get a much straighter line when I press my seams, and I don't love to press my seams open, but for this here, I think this one is going to be an all seams open kind of quilt, which is what they suggest you do. They suggest it on all of their patterns, and oftentimes when I try to do it myself, I see why they suggest to do that. If you do that, I just say shorten your stitch length a bit. Now let's go on to the other part. The part in the corner, the good part, the fun part. Now we need to do this section over here, which is comprised of a lot of half square triangles. We've already done this part here and this part there. Let's get into it. So you are going to have some squares that are larger and some squares that are larger and smaller. So you're going to grab your larger squares, and we are going to mark the back of some of them. Let's show you which ones. So we have 3 colors, and this is going to get a little tricky because this is my fabric number 2, and they say to draw a line on the back of that. Because mine is all printed, I'm going to just use, it doesn't matter. You need to draw a line on whichever one that you're going to be able to see the best. And that is going to be on this one, and that is going to be on this. So I'm going to draw a line from corner to corner on, I'm going to draw a diagonal line straight down the center for this. I'm just going to grab a friction pin. Friction pins are not made for fabric, but on the back of the fabric, we're fine. So I'm just going to draw a diagonal line, and then I'm going to sew a scant quarter. And when I say a scant quarter, I mean I'm going to really make it, it won't probably be a quarter. It'll probably be an eighth in the seam allowance. Why? Because you don't have a lot of room to trim these up to get the size that you want. We are not making oversized. These need to be the right size straight out the gate. And so the best way to do that is to really sew a scant quarter on either side. I'll show you how I do it. So I'm going to take these and put these right sides together. And then we're going to sew a scant quarter on either side. First, I'm going to mark all of these. Yep, marking them all. If you have diagonal seam tape, you can do that and just ride the inside of the line, but I think these are too big for me to be able to use my seam tape. I'm going to test it in just a second. So I've drawn all the lines on the back. These are too big for the tape, so no biggie. I'm just going to place this right sides together and sew a scant quarter on either side. Candy's Quilt Works does these little candies that she gives, and they're really just charm squares, and I love them because I use them as just little leaders and enders. Just a little candy. It's cute. Even though I have a single hole here, I still like to use leaders and enders just so that it doesn't try to eat, my fabric doesn't try to jump down in the center there, as fabric will sometimes do. Okay, we are just going to sew a bit. Now I'm going to grab this triangle, and we are going to put it down And I've got the inside of this foot lined right up against that line. And I'm just going to make sure that this is all lined up. Okay, that looks good. And this is mighty close to that line, I know. But I want a scant quarter because I do not want to be playing with this. Maybe too much of a scant quarter. So I've got the seam tape, but mine isn't long enough to do what I need it to do. So I'm just going to line these two up the best I can. And I'm actually going to sew onto my little thing here. And that's just to get it started and make sure that it doesn't jump down into my machine. And I'm going to line up this piece here with this foot, which is my 1/4 inch sewing foot on my straight stitch machine. It's nice and narrow. I'm lining that up with the outside of this line, and I'm just going to ride it. I'm just going to keep it parallel with that line. Keeping it parallel with that line. And that's going to give me the 1/4 inch that I think I need. Looks good. And so I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. I should be sewing onto, I would chain piece these. I am going to actually chain piece these, but I'm just going to show you with this. I'm going to do the other side now. I should be sewing onto this, but I didn't chain piece, but we'll be okay. So we're going to just sew, keeping that foot as lined up as we can. Okay, and that's what we should have. Now I'm going to cut directly down the center of that and press it. Let's do that. Now I'm going to move these out the way. And we're just going to cut this off because we do not need this. And we are going to take this and just cut straight down the center. Now we have 2 of these and we're going to press them open. So to press these open, I said I was going to press everything to one side, but I changed my mind. I'm going to press these all toward the dark because I want to use my block lock. If you guys want to see a tutorial on my block lock, I will plop it in right here. So we're just going to open this and make sure that it's pressing towards the dark. And then we're just going to roll this back. And now I'm going to square this up. I want to use my block lock, which will give you pretty much perfect half square triangles for the most part. So I want to use this to do it. And again, I have a couple of tutorials on how to do this. I'm going to link to that 5-yard quilt video that will show you exactly how to do it. I'm just going to do it super quick here. I'm going to pull it down and I'm going to do this. I love this, and I know that some people like it, some people don't. Everybody's got their method of their preferred, but that's my guy. It looks good, and it will sew really well. I'll show you guys when I get to sewing it. So that's what we're going to do for all of these here. And after we do that, we'll just put it together. So this section looks a little complicated, and this is going to be the upper left. So we've got these stripes, they're all done. We've got our half square triangles done. We have our full pleat pieces cut. But it definitely gets, it looks trickier than it is. There are actually only 2 blocks here, and they're just rotated in different directions in order to achieve this look. And I'm going to go through each block with you right now. If you are following what I'm doing, remember that this seems like it would be the focal fabric, but really our focal fabric 1 is the blue, and fabric 3 is this orange. I know it's going against the rules, but sometimes it's fun to do it that way. So I'm going to lay this out accordingly. I just don't want you to get too confused. I was debating if I was going to just lay out the whole block and show you that way, but I think it's going to be easier if I take you through building the parts of the block and then finishing up. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to take a fabric number 2 and one of these with a 2 and a 1, and we are going to sew it just like this. And we're going to do this 4 times. So I'm going to grab 1, 2. I'm not being particular about how this is working, but we're going to do this 4 times with your fabric number 1 like this. And then we're going to have 4 of those. 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to sew them together just like this. That's where we're going to start. So now this unit is done. We are going to do another unit, and it's going to be fabric 2, a fabric with a 1, which is going to be facing this way. So your fabric 1, your triangle right side should be here to here. These are important, the direction that they face. So these 2, isn't that funny how that just lines up? That's interesting. Does it line up? It does line up. Anyway, so that and that, and we're going to do this 4 times also. So we have this one already done. We're going to do this 4 times. So I'm going to grab 3 more. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to have 4 of these, and then we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4 of these. And this is how I take my stuff over to the sewing machine, which is all of 1 step away. But if you do it this way, when I go to sew these things, I usually am a little less turned around. So I'm going to sew this to this, and then I'm going to sew this to this. We're just going to take them just like this, and this, and these, and just go to town. And I'm not being particular about how they're oriented. So here are those blocks that are all together. I know they all kind of run together, which is good because that's what we want. We want this to actually be, we've got this fabric actually being the background. So I'm going to put that with this one. So now we have 2 units. Now let's work on this 3rd one. We are going to take this and we are going to put it so that your fabric number 1's angled this way. Then we're going to grab a fabric number 3 and we are going to rotate it so that it is angled this way. This is the angle of that one. And then we are going to take another one with the fabric number 1 and we are going to angle it this way. So then we're going to do this a total of 4 times. How long do you guys think it took me to realize that this was right here? Because I only had 3 left and I'm like, well, where is the 4th one? Yeah, That just happened. All right, so I line them up the way that they're supposed to go, just like this. Take them over to the sewing machine, just like this. This one to this one, press it, this one to this one. So now we have finished this one here. So you remember the blue was facing that direction, then we have 2 facing the same way. So that's that. So now we have 1, 2, and 3. So now we have our fabric number 3, this angle, okay? Then we have a plain fabric number 2 in the center, and then we have our number 3 up here in this corner this way. I know it's so hard to get these twisted and turned and all of that, so be sure, take your time. And I think this was a better way to do it as opposed to just laying out the entire thing and sewing it together. I think this is going to be better in the end. So let's match these. And you just make sure that you're putting one down exactly the way that the one before it looks. And we'll do... And we're doing 4 of these, just like everything else. And then I'm going to grab 1, 2, and 3. And put these in the center. Take them over to the sewing machine. So these are all finished. Now we're going to go on ahead and do this last little set here. And these are going to come together even faster than I thought doing it this way. So these need to be positioned so that your 3 fabric, the line is going this way and the 3 is up in this corner. So now we have all of our units here, this being the very last one. So now we need to grab our background blocks and start working with them. So for all of these blocks, the first thing that we're going to do is grab these and just sew them on just like this. We want the plain fabric number 2 here, and we want the number 1 fabric this way. And I'm just going to fold these right sides together and sew them. Caught a mistake. These were coming out just beautifully. And I'm like, oh, this is great. This should be in this corner, not that corner. So now I've got to rip 2 seams, that seam and this seam. That does not make me happy, but it is what it is. Also, these points are coming out lovely, but that's an issue. Got to fix it. Don't even know how this could have happened. At what stage? Well, yes, I do. Fixing it now. So now they're all proper. Now I'm going to take this one here and we are going to sew it to this side, and it makes this side little, I guess it's a part of the star. So these look great. They appear to all be the same. They look good. I'm very excited about this. I can't believe I was able to use this super busy print as the background print, and it looked cool. So block B is going to be one of these, and then one of these. This is the whole block B right here. So let's get to sewing. So these here have been sewn together, and now we just need to go on ahead and take this one and put it on there and sew down again. Easy peasy, no big deal, just finishing this star. So now that all the blocks are finished, they really come together. No, this one is not right. I can tell this is not making a star. Let's see what happens if we put it this way. All better. So I'm just looking to match up these stars. You just rotate these blocks. These blocks are identical. All 4 blocks. And then these 4 blocks are identical. You just twist them. And you get a different pattern. So here we have this star. We have blue star, blue star, blue star. And then orange stars here. Very, very interesting. And then, of course, I fussy cut this guy dead center. So now all that's left to do is just put it together. So we have this panel fully pieced, and then we have this panel fully pieced. This was really easy, just sewing the squares together, and I pressed everything open. It just was, I pressed most things open. I pressed all the squares to the dark side, and that worked out okay. There were some that I had to flip, but other than that, I like this. This is really interesting. Very, very interesting how it's all fallen. So I am going to now pin this to this. And then we will, again, I said I'm going to pin these together and then sew it down nice and easy. I'm going to put this up this way. And then that'll be, then I'll just put on the bottom portion. This came together beautifully. It looks really good. I forgot that we still have borders to do in addition to putting this bottom piece on. So I'm going to grab the bottom piece and then pin it on here. And I guess I have options because it starts with the blue and ends with the blue, so I can kind of figure out which way I want it to turn. And I think this is fine. This feels fine. And I'm just going to pin this in place. Looks like it matches up. This is actually very interesting. Can't wait to step back and look at it. I have not done that yet. Yes, this is busy, but doesn't bother me. Doesn't bother me not one bit. I think this blue really breaks it up. I can't wait to see how that orange frames it, especially seeing that orange is a what am I trying to say? It's a sparkly fabric. It's not just a plain orange. Let's make sure that the blue, the stripe goes on the bottom of the machine. And then all of this, the flipping stuff that I might need to press under the presser foot goes on the top so that I can control that better. And I'm going to start pinning. I pin the front, the back, and the half, and then I just fill in between. And I have truly become a pinner. I know there are some people who don't pin, they don't need to, but for a lot of the things that I do, I have found that pinning gives me much better results. Because I can sew 2 things that are supposed to be the same length together and get wildly different results if I don't pin. Leave it to me. So here we have all of it sewn together, and this is a treat. I am very pleased with how this looks. It looks so good. It looks really good. I'm very pleased. So now we just need to throw on these nice chunky borders, and the way that I'm going to do that is, let me look and see the size first. So here are my strips. I'm going to take the selvages off, and I'm just going to sew, I think I'm going to sew them all together, and then measure the sides, the 2 sides, sew it, pin it, sew it, do the top and the bottom, pin it, sew it. The reason why I just don't add it and just sew down is because I tend to get waves and ripples and stretching and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's just best to measure. I've had some bad things happen with that. So I'm going to take these selvages off and just, I'm not going to sew them cross. I'm just going to sew them end to end. Ignore the couch and the junk and all the things. This is the best thing that I bought at Road to California. It is that plywood covered batting. I mean, everybody makes these, but I wasn't I wasn't going to do it. But I've never been able to lay out a quilt in this way and mark it to cut. Like, this is just such a game changer. This ironing board works so well. It has the reflective heating and the batting. It's really nice. I got it from the 108 Backing People, and she just keeps them with her. I don't know if you can get these shipped. I imagine that would be astronomical. But if you ever catch a show, this is the best purchase. My girlfriend purchased one too, and she loves hers also. So this is very pleasant.